You know, we believe that at the heart of this missional movement is reproducing churches. And so in this chapter, we're going to talk about that. We're going to share some of the stories of churches that we've been able to plant through our New Thing network. And in those stories, we're going to give you 4 lessons that we think might save you maybe 4 years, who knows, maybe more. But again, hopefully you can learn from some of our experiences. In addition to that, we're also going to take a few moments in this chapter to speak directly to lead pastors and the unique role that you play sometimes when it comes to releasing or sending a church planter. And then we're going to reverse it. We're also going to talk to the church planter to be about how you can leave well and some things that we've learned about that as we've planted churches. In addition, though, I want you to listen to Brian Maw. Brian left community, came here as a leadership president, then left community to start a church in New York City. It's a Forefront Community Church, and he's going to tell you a little bit about his story in planting that church.
When I was about 29 or 30 years of age, I felt like God was leading me to do something different than what I was currently doing with my life. I had lived a pretty good story, but honestly, it was maybe average at best. Had a wonderful wife, three great kids, and really a pretty good job. But I felt like I was only using just a portion of the gifts that God had given me. I'd seen a couple of my friends and a couple of my relatives start churches in large cities across the United States, and really felt like maybe this is what God was calling me to do, was to make a move to start a new church, and particularly in New York City, as I had been there several years earlier and developed a heart for what was going on there and what many people would describe as like spiritual poverty or spiritual emptiness in a very influential city. Some would say one of the most influential cities in the world. I had taken a look at what had happened in my life over the past 30 years. And I had spent most of my time in the church, and most of the time in the church was spent at the church I grew up at and the church that I had been a part of after college. And the 2 things that I took away from these churches is that they loved me unconditionally and that they loved others unconditionally. And although I was going to change stylistically how we would effectively reach Manhattanites and those living in New York City, the DNA of the church was going to be that we would love the people who came to Forefront, and that we would love the people in the city. That I felt like my life had been blessed beyond belief, and I wanted to take what had been planted in me by my parents and by my community and to give that away to people who needed it the most. And so we started Forefront in 2005, and immediately people who needed to be connected began to do that. They were connected into our community, whether it be on Sunday mornings or a small group or through serving. And then it began to catch on that this is one of the major things that people needed in their life was connection. But the biggest thing they needed in their life was obviously connection to God. And so as we began to help people find their way back to God at Forefront, one of the things that I was kind of hit with or struck with was this idea of, okay, we have this here for us, but what about creating this same type of environment for those who don't know Christ, specifically maybe those who don't live in this particular part of Manhattan. With 1 million plus people living in Manhattan, 8 million living in New York City, we were creating space for those who were coming, but what about those who came and they were traveling too far to get to our location? So we started to cast this vision to our church that it's been a beautiful thing that whenever you wanted to get connected, we created a space for you at our church, in our homes, on our service teams. And now we want to reproduce that and make more space available for those who long to be connected. That idea caught on pretty quickly because everyone understood what it was like to be on the outside and then be invited to be a part of the community rather quickly, to be accepted, to be affirmed. And so then we began by reproducing small groups. We began again by reproducing the number of services that we were having at our current location. And then a couple of years into it, we began to cast this dream of what it would look like for us to reproduce what we had on the east side of the city, all over New York City, and be a part of what was going on around the world. And so we held meetings, we created a launch team, and then what I did is I just talked about it over and over and over again from the stage, that we wanted to take what God had given us and then give it to everyone else. It was almost like what God was trying to do with the Israelites, as we read about in the Old Testament. The Israelites sort of felt like God was just for them, that He was their God. And what He showed them is, I came to bless you so that you could bless the entire world. And so we began to lay out that dream to the people that were coming to forefront, that God was giving us something so that we could give it to everyone else. And so now we not only have a dream of reproducing Christ followers or reproducing small groups or reproducing congregations or leaders or artists, but we have a dream of reproducing locations and churches all throughout Manhattan and the different neighborhoods, and all throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City, into Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx and Staten Island, that we want to be living out the mission of God by reproducing these churches so that the people who are traveling 45 minutes or an hour to come to Forefront now will be able to invite their friends who live next door to them to come to a church that's just right down the street. And so as we began to understand what God was doing through the Israelites in the Old Testament, what He showed again by sending His Son, Jesus Christ, to earth to live, to die, and then to rise again so that we would each have an opportunity for life. We realize now that it's our mission not just to receive the new life that God has given us through Jesus, but to extend that invitation to everyone else. We want to join God in the renewal of all things in New York City by helping people find their way back to God.